Carl, he set up Waviatech, which he sold to Airdata and sold to Boeing back in the day. So a bit of a veteran in the aircraft digital records industry, and one of the architects at the start of the Spec 2500. Carl, sorry if I'm speaking you up too much, but one of the guys who's involved right at the start of Spec 2500 as well. Alan asked us to give you a talk today to keep things at a very high level. We're not getting into specifics about what BlockAviation is doing or our projects, but look, we'd be happy to talk to you afterwards if there was more, if you wanted to get into more detail with us. So Alan asked us to talk about blockchain and blockchain developments in the aviation sector and in the aircraft leasing sector. To start out, I just want to give a bit of background about blockchain developments generally in the world, because it's a bit of a hyped area, and that hype is probably unhelpful because the hype is pretending to solve the world's problems, and blockchain, like any technology, is just a technology. So what it's really about is about the problems and solutions to those problems. So just we have a bit of a 101 at the start. So the promise of blockchain, or distributed ledger technology as it's interchangeably called, is shared record keeping, multi-party consensus, independent validation, so that there's validation and consensus on records as they're written to the platform, secure audit trail, and tamper-proof. And I think in the aviation sector, we can all agree that how aircraft records and records are managed, that sounds like a very appealing solution. But that is also fraught with challenges when it comes to actually going about implementation and bringing this technology to the real world. So I've used a document from Cambridge University, which I'll share with Alan afterwards, and you can have a read of that to try and categorize this. So in terms of categories, you've got two types of DLT types. You've got true multi-party consensus systems, and you can see here from the graphic, this is about 3% of the live enterprise blockchain networks that are operational at the moment. I should have mentioned that Keith Baer, who's one of the authors of this report, is on the advisory board of BlockAviation. So he's a key contributor to our project. So we're privileged to have him on board. So, but the rest of the projects are blockchain memes, which that they're using parts of blockchain to implement, but they're not true blockchain multi-party consensus systems. So down the bottom, you've got a spectrum, which I guess is where how things develop out to being high on the blockchain meme spectrum. So you start on the left where, and again, it's where there's a lot of hype around blockchain, and blockchain is an excuse type projects. And these projects tend to be internally focused, and there's executive buy-in, and they're used for a marketing purpose. So you can sort of judge for yourself where some of the projects are on this spectrum. As you move towards the high end of the memes, towards a genuine shared infrastructure where you've got inter-organizational cooperation, the locus of execution is shared, and it's a genuinely jointly operated platform. But there's a roadmap to getting there, I guess, is the point that we're making here. This takes time to achieve. Today, the majority of blockchain networks are founder-led. They're very much long-term projects. So the median timeline for a blockchain network, and this is the study again that Cambridge University have done, it's 25 months from conception to production for the blockchain network. And the vast majority of them are founder-led. And I guess the point of that is that there's a requirement for a catalyst. There's a requirement for somebody to pull it together, to get the consensus protocols together. And the alternative is consortium-led. And the two best examples of this are IBM Maersk, where Maersk, which is the big shipping container, they've got about 25% of the world's freight forwarding have built a network to manage the documentation in freight forwarding, that all that documentation that goes between ports, and to try and create, ultimately what they're trying to create is a digital bill of lading. The consortium-led approach example is WeTrade. So WeTrade is a consortium of banks. As you can imagine, these can be quite unwieldy and difficult to use, difficult to manage. So the majority, as we said, of cases tend to be founder-led and to have that catalytic approach to getting the live blockchain networks. The key value proposition for the moment, so where is the focus? The focus is on cost reduction, and cost reduction is achieved through reducing the amount of reconciliation efforts that are required. So documents having to be duplicated, documents having to be checked and rechecked, which I think in aviation there's a clear use case for that. Currently, the value add and revenue generation and new market models, it is early days for that still. These are to come down the road. I think everybody can see the potential of these projects, but they are it's relatively early days for those. The focus is still very much on cost reduction. So initiatives in aviation. So we have Willis and Flydocs. They announced a bi-party project back in February 2019. We were in discussions with those parties back then. We haven't honestly heard a huge amount more on that project since then. The ICAO ran a blockchain aviation summit in Abu Dhabi in April 2019. We were at that summit. It was a 3-day summit in Abu Dhabi, which there was a lot of consultancies at it, again, extolling the virtues of blockchain technology and how it can change things in the future. There was also a demonstration of a pilot with Etihad and a local MRO. There was a Hong Kong-based company that demonstrated that pilot. The pilot was interesting, but very, very ambitious in that it was probably looking to displace the existing infrastructure in the industry. And finally, recently we've had the MRO Blockchain Alliance, and we note that both Flydocs and Willis are in this blockchain alliance. So this is a CETA program, and they're looking at a parts tracking solution to save about $3.5 billion in the industry in terms of tracing parts through the back to birth trace process. In Ireland and in aircraft leasing, the Irish government, they set out their financial service strategy back for the 2025 financial service strategy, and Article 28 of that, I've just taken a little synopsis of it there, is to establish a DLT platform for aircraft leasing in Ireland. And they've charged Aircraft Leasing Ireland, which is the council of lessors. There's 32 members in that council at the moment. And they've run 2 meetings, 2 symposiums with a large, it's quite a large group of people. The meeting in October had about, I think, 40 people at the meeting. And then they had a follow-up meeting to narrow the focus down in February 2020. And we're aiming for a new meeting in Q3. We've had Avchain. I think Avchain spoke at this forum back in January, as far as I remember. So they were working with IBM on centralizing documentation on an IBM platform. And then there's ourselves. So we were founded in December 2017. We completed Propeller Shannon, which is the accelerator, back 2018. We completed Barclays Techstars, another accelerator, 2019. We're working on the world's first global registry for aircraft records. We've got 3 pilot projects currently underway. It's you know, I think we can say that we're working in the Spec 2500 domain, and we're also looking at aircraft utilization and trying to create a common log for utilization. So just to answer Alan's questions, you know, about the impact of COVID, I think obviously it's created a massive imperative, and people are looking at new ways of doing things currently. So what we're seeing is that people are really keen to understand how blockchain can improve the digital aircraft records process, because so that we can lock in long-term value. People are looking for safer and more efficient ways to move records around the industry, and I guess this speaks to the Spec 2500 developments. People are looking for new ways to store long-term value of the records, to remove that replication and duplication that we know is there and is a big problem. It's creating large inefficiencies in the industry and creates rigidity in moving aircraft assets around the industry, which is going to be a big issue over the next 12 to 18 months as the industry is really, you know, trying to recover from the obvious chaos that COVID has created. And finally, we see that owners are looking for more timely information on the location and the utilization of their assets. And to that, we have a very interesting pilot in place with Aviation. So the Irish Aviation Authority are an investor in BlockAviation, and Aviation, they've also invested in Aviation, which is a global satellite constellation of 66 satellites, which is tracking ADS-B data of aircraft. So we're working with Aviation to provide utilization services for last known location, for daily and monthly utilization on these aircraft, and also incursion reports, just for being able to track incursion into no-go zones. So I think hopefully I know that's not very detailed data, but hopefully it's helpful. We're available to speak to anybody if they'd like to follow up with us afterwards, but I think we'll wrap it up there, Alan.
Brilliant. John, that was a fantastic overview of, I mean, I know a lot of people are scared about blockchain and what it means and understanding it, but I think you gave a very good overview there and explained it quite well, and how it's going to impact aircraft leasing and aircraft digital records. Thanks very much for that. We'll hold off. As I said, there's a few questions coming in here now, and we'll just hold them until the end. I will just want to share a few slides with you, kind of a summary of the last workshop that we had on aircraft digital records. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to find this screen. So hopefully you can see that.
Yeah.
Back in November last year, we had a workshop in Shannon that was quite well attended, and we covered blockchain, we covered aircraft digital records in general, and we also spoke a bit about Spec 2500 and non-incident statements. For anybody that didn't catch that, it's summarized in a LinkedIn article that I wrote at the time, and that's just a screenshot of that, but the link to it is there at the top if anybody wants to have a look at it after this, or you can find it easily enough in LinkedIn. Part of that presentation, we had John Barry giving us an overview, and apologies from John, he couldn't make it today, but he gave us a good overview of what's involved in an aircraft digital records platform, and there are 5 key aspects to it, from imaging captured, archival and storage, retrieval and distribution, business process automation, and secure mobile or remote access. There are some very good digital record systems in the market. Examples would be Stream from Air Data, FlyDocs from Lufthansa Technik, Air Vault from GE, Cloud Cards from Shannon, Sparta from Acumen, which we'll hear a little bit more about, and Elevate from Compass. So they're the 5 key elements, and you know, all of these platforms are incorporating these elements and the elements that you see in this slide in terms of platform services, process and automation, and content services into the various digital platforms. And all of them, I believe, are also now incorporating Spec 2500 standards into the various platforms. Anton Tams was also a speaker at that event, and he gave us a great overview about, you know, how aircraft digital records are coming together, and it's not sustainable, as Anton said, to continue to using paper-based record systems to support increasing populations of aircraft. One of the things that Anton mentioned, which I think is key, is that he said that in the ICAO Chicago Convention, nowhere does it say that paper records are mandatory. It just says that appropriate records need to be kept. So over the last number of years, there's been significant industry activity to get that, to go down that road. And the three key pillars are harmonization, acceptance, and standardization. So you can see there some of the bullet points from Anton from that talk in November last year. So yeah, in the talk he mentioned IATA guidance material, and that's a screenshot of the document that's out there. It's worthwhile looking at, and you will find a lot of interesting information, especially in Annex 2 about aircraft records and what should be incorporated into Spec 2500. So another good reference and source of information is the Aviation Working Group, and they're trying to coordinate various projects in aviation, and in particular in aircraft leasing. And you might be familiar with the GATS Global Aircraft Trading System, something that they're working on, Cape Town Convention. That's something we may actually visit in the next week or two on the APTN Zoom calls. Also, Anton mentions the ICAO Doc 9680, which is published in 2018. That's a screenshot from it. And if you want to learn more about electronic aircraft maintenance records, it's worthwhile having a look at that document as well. These documents will be available in the APTN members area. We have a shared members area where the content of the Zoom calls and documents like this are located if you need to find them. So that's just a quick overview. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to introduce Ameya Gore, who's Senior Vice President Digital Business at Acumen Aviation. Ameya was very kind to come in at short notice as John couldn't make, John Barry couldn't make it. He's going to give us a quick overview of his interpretation of Spec 2500 as it applies to the Sparta Acumen platform. So Ameya, if you're okay to take the reins, I will stop sharing here and hand it over to you.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me, and very, very happy to take up this on a short notice. And hello to everyone on the call. I can see some familiar names, so pleased to see you guys on the call. So I'll just share my screen now quickly with a very short presentation. Just threw in a few slides together, but what I'm going to speak about is more related to the technology side of the implementation of ATS Spec 2500 and what we see as challenges in the near term, and what we feel is necessary in terms of overcoming those technological challenges in achieving what the ultimate purpose of ATS Spec 2500 is, which is to harmonize the records, to standardize what records get transferred along with the asset, and also to make sure that the transfer of the assets is easier across the world when we have really a global aviation scene there. So just quickly on ATS Spec 2500, basically it's again as it is known as a basic standard for aviation technical records. It's designed to cater to all kinds of transferable aircraft records, which are essential for cross-jurisdictional transactions of assets. And it is also intended to be used by the operators or lessors or anybody who's buying or selling airplanes.
May I just interrupt? Can you do the slideshow? Make the screen.
Sorry,
one.
Yeah. Okay, that should do it.
Absolutely, thanks.
Yeah, so it's intended for ensuring that the transfer of the records is easier. Of course, when the ATS Spec 2500 the philosophy or the objective was initiated, it hasn't changed much from a technology perspective, and it still provides scenarios or guidelines for implementing Spec 2500 compliance to using an electronic crate or XML schematics for data sets. But based on our current scenario, I think the technology is already outdated, and it poses certain challenges in transferring the records. Before that, we'll just quickly give you a quick overview of what the salient features of the Sparta system is. So like all the other names that you took, Alan, this product also has very good online repository features. It has a secure online platform. It is hosted on the best of the class hosting systems and servers, and continuing to work towards implementation of machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies as we go through in the technology life cycle. But what is more interesting is in terms of the Spec 2500 compliance. So there are, I believe, three elements as you mentioned in your slides as well, which is first of all harmonization and standardization of the records, which means that it demands the records to be available in a well laid out structure. It ensures that they follow a specific guidelines, as you mentioned in Annexure 2 of the Aircraft Leasing Advisory Group document that we have, and it should follow also standard nomenclature. So these three elements of maintaining clean aircraft records is achieved in Sparta, as well as I'm sure it is achieved in other online digital records platforms as well. What is also important is ensuring all the B2B LLP B2B binder, shop visit records, and certificates are maintained digitally and securely. That as well is in compliance to the Spec 2500 requirements. However, the most important bit is the data transfer mechanism that the ATS Spec 2500 requires, and it still requires, or they still refer to, I believe, the technology of the crate system or XML formatting, which I believe in today's case is extremely challenging because of the technology shift that we see from the previous Microsoft or the previous technology products compared to today's coding languages of these platform systems. What we have done in Sparta is basically used a lot of the open source technology, which is obviously the way to go forward in the given technology scenario, and at the same time achieved the objective of making the data transferable through a encryption key mechanism where all the records, all the data that is on the platform can be securely moved from one lessor or one buyer's Sparta platform to another buyer's Sparta platform through encryption key. And in essence, it still retains the entire configuration of the asset records. It still retains the entire properties of the records being transferred, but at the same time achieves the purpose of making a seamless transaction between two parties who are taking the asset. So here I would like to question essentially the Spec 2500 compliance mechanism with regards to the technology that they are proposing, and the industry like BlockAviation that we are seeing and blockchain technology. I believe the Spec 2500 compliance needs to, does it now necessitate that ICAO and IATA need to relook at their vision of this particular harmonization and data transfer technology? So with that, I would kind of leave the forum open for questions and Q&A on with regards to what their views are with regards to technology.
Okay, thank you. very much, Ame, for that. Very interesting observations on the technology and where Spec 2500 falls. We have a couple of questions from the audience, and I'll get to those now. First one from John Fields. Will the blockchain technology have a role in instances where an operator uses a traditional records approach, i.e. standard DFP, that's dirty fingerprint records, and use of standard OCR, optical character recognition scanning at the time of redelivery, or is it necessary for operators to embrace it during the lease term? Before John comes in on that, I see a note from the last workshop in November last year. It was John Barry mentioned, he likes to quote from Bellingham's 2017 publication, Customers the Day After Tomorrow, where organizations are categorized as having type 1, type 2, or type 3 DNA. Type 1 is traditional paper-based organizations, and type 3 are fully digital enabled. So which company's digital records DNA? I think this is the same point that John is mentioning here. Do we have to get these traditional airlines and companies into type 3 DNA before we can implement these type of solutions? John, what do you think?
Look, I think when you say type 3 DNA, what is, I think I got type 2, and I think type 2 is probably sufficient for the moment.
Yeah.
Give me the 3 types again, John.
Well, it's just type 1 is old hat. It's paper based. It's the DFPs, you know, and it's the boxes of records coming back to the lessor. No scanning. You know, type 2 maybe OCR and that type of thing. Type 3 is fully digitized in the cloud.
Yeah, no, I think type 2 is enough. I mean, I think we have to be realistic about where the industry's at the moment. I mean, there's still probably 30%, maybe 40% on paper. So I think and that's where we're coming at it, is we're looking at creating a registry to register scanned DFPs, and we need to move it on from there. I think DNA type 3 is still a bit away, and we need a network to create that. And I think that's the challenge that everybody's trying to figure out. How do we make that happen? And yeah, we've got some interesting pilots. And I think Spec 2500 is a great start to getting us there, because at least it's creating a crate and a data format that we can use. But we need to get the industry moving towards that. And I think it is moving too slowly. So, but with COVID and with what's happening, it might be accelerated in the next couple of years, and it might move much faster than everybody thinks.
Good. Second question from Bruce Allison, again referring to one of your slides, John, in connection with parts tracking. Do you know which companies have inputs? Is it just the OEM, lessors and airlines, or do you know if you service material suppliers will have an input into that project? Or
I mean, the MRO Alliance, I kind of, in the slides we spoke about the consortium, and there's a lot of parties at the table there, and it's not clear what they're really trying to achieve. What we do know is that in the spec standards, and I think Carl can tell you the exact standards, that there is an XML format for the Form 1, and that Form 1 should be digitally transmittable. So I think that's what the potential is. Carl, do you want to chime in there, or?
Yeah, Alan, to your point about the DNA type 1, 2, or 3, especially with parts, mostly it's type 1, I would say, at the minute, paper-based Form 1 that's circulated around the ecosystem. There is a specification afoot. In fact, it's quite an old specification, probably 7+ years old, Spec 2000, Chapter 16. And sure, it's there, but it just doesn't seem to be widely used, where you could actually put all the information that you're about to print onto a Form 1 and sign into an XML data set and move that around the industry instead. I just think it's not enabled yet, so we don't see so many of them at the minute. You could, by the way, put that into a crate from Spec 2500 and move it around. But that's probably where a lot of people are struggling to say the scale of the parts issue in the industry is so wide, it's so large, that it's a really tough nut to crack. And that's probably why there's so many people involved, so many stakeholders, so many parts. It's quite a big deal to move forward.
Good, thanks for that. Just if anybody wants to come in with a question, that you can unmute your mic. If not, we give it a second there.
Just going back on my question there that I asked about the 3.5 billion save. I don't understand where the 3.5 billion save is on parts tracking. Like, are just the OEMs and the MROs involved? Because parts tracking is parts tracking. Like, there's different values on paperwork issued by an engine that's been flying or an aircraft that's been flying in harsh environment versus an aircraft that's been flying, say, in Europe or America. So, like, where is the 3.5 billion save on paperwork, which I don't understand, is number one. And number two is, this: when we buy an aircraft to tear down, does the used suppliers material have a say in what exactly paperwork they should get? Because there's so many different criterias in selling a part to different MROs or to different airlines. Is it going to be standardized? What way is it going to be done? It's just a minefield as far as I'm concerned.
Fair point, Bruce. Yeah.
So Bruce, Carl might answer the second part of the question, but the $3.5 billion number, that's a number that the MRO Alliance have come up with. I assume that's costs that are run up through lack of documentation or gaps in documentation. We're not sure really how they've come up with that number, so it's hard for us to explain how that savings is going to come about.
Good. I just see a comment here from Fergal, and I think it came up at the workshop in Shannon as well. It really will take action from the civil aviation regulators to encourage the uptake of these more sophisticated approaches. Some are slow, some are more proactive, and I suppose it's the likes of EASA to drive it maybe from the European perspective, FAA, to get to, let's say, the DNA Type 3 across their own particular environments. But yeah, Fergal, I think you're right. There are actions required by civil aviation regulators to do that, and they should be singing the same song, you know. Yeah, comment from Seb Lawson. There are plenty of blockchain systems being discussed in the industry, and you say they're you're talking about the world's first blockchain registry. How are you different, and when will you be open for people to use the blockchain system? That's one for John or yourselves. The first blockchain registry, is there a timeline for it, or when will it be available?
Yeah, well, look, it's already there technically, but a registry that's not populated is of little value. So we're currently underway with pilots. So we're working on a pilot in the next 3 to 4 months, which is going to prove, we think, some very interesting things, and we're working on the utilization solution as well. So I think we've given an overview of all the projects. Other ones, look, by all means, if people want to pop them onto us, and we can have a look at them. But I think people are coming at it from different angles, which is what's required at this stage, because it is very early stages, and that's what I wanted to kind of show through the presentation, that it's early days, but there will come a tipping point where it'll make sense for everybody to jump on board.
Good stuff. All right, guys, I'm just conscious of time here. I think I'll hand over to Alex now to give the quick update on APTN membership. Thanks again for your input. Alex, are you ready to go?
Yeah, perfect. Cheers, guys. Thanks for those presentations. They were brilliant. I won't keep you too long here. I'll just give you a quick update, a few new slides about APTN. So as always, just recommend you to go over and have a look and join the APTN hub if you haven't already, or in the bottom right here, the APTN corporate page. Follow that for day-to-day updates. This Zoom call, which will be available on YouTube as a webinar and on Spotify as a podcast, They will be posted in the next few days, as well as the articles by Alan summarizing all these Zoom calls. So this is just a presentation here on the potential targets that we have, that myself and Alan have identified globally. So as we always say, we're trying to make APTN as widespread and worldwide as possible, so that we can have members in every single country, so that for members it becomes a global network. So here you can see we have just over 5,000 contacts, which are potential targets to join the APTN network, which we're hoping to grow every day. So this graph here just shows the growth that we've had in the last 6 or 7 months, beginning in November. The APTN members has grown nicely, and we have had a huge response to the hub group, almost hitting 1,200 members. And as always, we're always encouraging, if you're a member of the hub group but you haven't signed up to the APTN platform yet, ATP membership is still free for 2020. So you really benefit from all the applications of the platform. So we really recommend that you sign up to that. And most of you probably received an email yesterday inviting you to join the WhatsApp group, and there was a great response with lots of people joining through the invitation. We're really trying to hone in on this personal network of aircraft technical professionals within these WhatsApp groups, which really helps create kind of a personal relationship. People are introducing themselves, asking questions all the time in these WhatsApp groups, and it's also another great way to give quick updates on ATPN, but also the whole network as a whole. So these are my contact details. If you have any questions about these Zoom calls, the WhatsApp groups, or any of the LinkedIn or platform pages. And we've also set up a Instagram page and Twitter, which you can log on and look up, which will also be giving similar updates.
That's great. Alex, thanks a million for that update again. It's great work. And just to conclude then, thanks guys for taking part and listening in. Hopefully we brought you something new and interesting on the APTN platform again this week. We're at 12:40, yeah, just 40 minutes, which is good. Just to conclude with next week, I'm hoping to bring a couple of speakers on to talk about GATS and how it impacts the technical side in aircraft leasing and airlines. I know it is primarily a commercial contracts-driven process, but I'm sure there are redelivery technical aspects to it as well that we can learn about. Similarly, on Cape Town, I think both are related, and Cape Town protocols and who recently has joined and how it impacts on the technical side of aircraft leasing and redeliveries. So I'm hoping to have a couple of speakers on those topics next week, and we'll let you know more about that in the invites early next week. So on that note, I'd like to thank everybody for taking part, and especially our speakers, and especially Ameya at such short notice. Thanks again.
No worries, Alan. My pleasure.
And, John, thank you very much. So we let you off and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, Alan.